Hey, what is up? What is up? YouTube gaming family is K-Rod here. I'm back at it with another video for y'all today. And yeah, man, let's get right to it. I got a pretty good video topic for y'all today. This is gonna be more of like a political history topic for y'all. I usually have like my little pep talk to kind of bring up any like socioeconomic video topics or anything like historical political topics. So whenever I come up with anything to mind that's like, off the dome, I usually kind of do that. So I got one, for y'all tonight. But before I get right to it, be sure to subscribe to Unbearable Skill. I am playing a pretty good video out of him where there's a beef set between Deoxys, who's a high level MKX player, facing up against some dude named Savior. This is actually a pretty good match, so if you guys want to go check it out, please go check them out. So, yeah, be sure to like, rate, comment, and subscribe, and appreciate you guys for supporting the videos. All right, so yeah, let's get right into it, man. We have a pretty good topic that I always like to debate with people, and yeah, let's talk about this because this is always on my mind, and I always have a very tough time, explaining this, to people. And people like to make me, like, people, like, oh, wait, hold on. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. Yeah, so basically, I always have, like, a tough time trying to break this topic down to people. And, for those of you that always, that do know me, I'm extremely, like, how should I say, libertarian. And, from a, how should I say, like, from an anarchic point of view, the status mindset is very toxic and very degenerate, where people believe in very immoral beliefs to think that, oppression is good and therefore the use of violence or the use of coercion is justified because that is the way, of the world. Basically, it's just like another, you know, demoralized argument to say that might makes right, which it doesn't, but might makes the reality of unjustified control. So basically, to kind of like simplify this, it seems like a lot of people throughout history and throughout current present day time is that we have a huge issue within the world, the world of a statism, where people justify evil that was done by previous, you know, like I want to say governmental regimes through violent nation states where people will justify a lot of bad beliefs and therefore they don't learn because statism is a mental disorder. And when people don't want to hear the truth, they start getting very disoriented to start sticking with their political beliefs. And then they say, oh, well, there's like a reason why I'm here on the right, or there's a reason why I'm here, on the left, blah, blah, blah. And I think, this is like another good video that that I could really talk about, but I'll probably talk about this in another, how should I say, like, video. It'll be labeled for, do people have political disoriented, syndrome? Like basically, do people have a political disorder syndrome, when people are so fixated into politics? But that's a different video for a different day. But I'm going to be talking about, for today's topic, why do colonies exist under statism within the way of governments that are acting now, especially with, high power, how should I say, superpower, nation states that are enforcing their will. And yeah, I'm gonna just give you guys like my 2 cents on this. And to simplify this, the term colony is a very loaded term, and obviously within the colonial sense, a lot of people are very, how should I say, they're very disingenuous to kind of think that colonies are a good thing. And in retrospect, it is a Latin term for, I want to say, basically saying that, you know, I want to say this dates back to like the Romans, but it's supposed to represent like a farmland to say that you are, homesteading a piece of property, and therefore it's supposed to be subjugated to those that were military soldiers under the Roman Empire, to say that any land that they had, conquered or invaded, that would be, distributed to the soldiers that had colonies. So therefore, that's like a term for their, like, I guess, like their, I want to say like their military service for having their own like rural land. So, it's kind of like a very loaded term, but in the modernistic, definition, to kind of like explain it more politically, obviously colonialism, very evil, philosophical background in terms of governments, using unjustified coercion to invade other parts of the world to push their political and economic beliefs to another group of people that did not consent to that. And therefore, those people are subjugated to temporary, enslavement for the time being until people start revolting and political revolutions, arise out of it. But, for those of you that already know that, I don't have to go through like the whole, explanation of it. But to kind of like simplify this, because I don't really have much time, I guess the reason why colonies still exist is that there is a huge dysfunction in the world where people believe that might makes right. And I've already said it before that might makes the reality, and might does not make right. Might only makes the reality of unjustified coercion to apply to people that have been, yeah, that have been, oppressed to the point where they are in fear of having to be resisted when they're having to, well, how should I say, they are in fear of having to resist when the blowback can be occurred to them to face violent punishment, from the state. And the biggest issue, however, is that a lot of colonies within most of what the world, which, we could always talk about that the like Americas with, obviously let the Caribbean island nations, probably some parts of South America to this day. You got French Guinea. Like I forgot what that little island or that little piece of land is called, but yeah, French Guinea, and I think Curacao. It's still its own country. I think so. I'm not too sure if Curacao is still under the Dutch control, but I know that the Dutch are trying to keep their quote unquote colonies, controlled. But I think they're going to be losing that more over time because they're weak, as they don't want to accept that and claim that. But yeah, I mean, pretty much, the same can be applied to Africa. Wait, hold on, give me 1 second. uh Hold on. All right, I'm back. But yeah, the same can be, like, can be like applied for Africa, Asia, a lot of lands that have been, like, that have been wrongfully, invaded by, powerful armies. Well, I wouldn't even say powerful, but just militaries that had their advantage to go in and try to, unjustifiably invade and try to like hurt and take people's, like, lives away to kill. And, like, it's all evil. It's all evil for the sake that, is the world better after being invaded, of that land, and therefore do people thrive better? And the truth of the matter is that, colonies don't really provide a benefit for the people that are there. It's only there for the nation state that's invading to benefit for themselves, for the ruling class that's having to exploit off of those people that actually live there. And the truth is that if you are saying that your culture is good for what it is because your people can still, like, your people can still live prosperously while being controlled by a, imperialistic superpower, that doesn't really hold much weight, because it's more like saying that if you're okay with the state of affairs of your people being, oppressed by a, invading nation state, and therefore your people can't secede away from that, invading nation state to reclaim its own country or to reclaim its own territory, then that makes you a coward. That doesn't make you loyal to your own people. That actually makes you look like a coward to your own people. And you're too afraid to accept your own bloodline for actually what it is and for what people had stood for. So, I mean, I can give you guys plenty of examples, but, let's just take a look at like Hawaii. Hawaii was its own land for thousands of years up until the United States wanting to temporarily take them over for the time being to forcibly turn them into a state, and therefore to this day Hawaii is just another state where Americans go in and they take up property, and therefore the Hawaiian people have been quote unquote displaced to a particular degree, which like I got to talk about that. Is displacement a good thing or a bad thing per se? But that's a video for like another day. But yeah, pretty much, if you kind of take a look at that, like, granted, Hawaii probably within many different generations, like of the past, they probably didn't have like, the best way of life compared to what they have now, where the U.S. yeah, they did unjustifiably control Hawaii, and therefore the monarchy got met with a gigantic military force that they probably couldn't handle. So therefore, the people ended up surrendering for the sake of trying to protect their people. But the truth of what the matter is that America did far worse to hold them under their control, and therefore, they forced Hawaii to become a state. That being the U.S., political ruling class, at that time. So, it's always very telling because there is a lot of speculation that people say about colonialism, where they say like, well, it's a good thing because if you have these colonies that are to just reclaim their own countries that were there for the people that were first native to those to those like smaller lands, or any land in particular. But the stupid status argument would be, well, these people would be defenseless, they wouldn't be able to win their own fights and blah 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 and all this other weird crap. And I'm just thinking like, well, what about all the lands within Europe where nations like Switzerland, which they're probably like one of the smallest countries in Europe, but they're able to hold their own. And like, it doesn't matter if they have like good military technology, it's more like the people are there to fight, and those people have never really been in that many war conflicts because nobody doesn't really mess with Switzerland. But it's more like they don't pick fights with anybody. But when it comes to like any other nation within Europe, like France, Italy, Spain, all these countries that have been massively invaded by outside nations, which that's most likely going to be North African countries or the Arabic nations that have taken them over for thousands of years, and also Asian, cultures as well. That being like the Mongolians and the Huns. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I mean that pretty much shows like it doesn't matter how big or small a country is, but it's more like, oh wait, hold on, give me 1 second. Oh man, like I hate these ads. Hold on. All right, I'm back. So yeah, to pretty much simplify everything, um, if you look at the political state with Hawaii, like they've gone through their ups and downs in terms of like what they have gone through, but in the case of the US controlling them and having a huge track record of poorly mistreating them, it comes to show that colonies existing in the modern world is very dysfunctional to the point where people don't have their own identity, and therefore nation states that control smaller parts of the world don't end up protecting those people any better. And back to my original argument about you know basically like if these colonies were to reclaim their independence, tomorrow. This is coming from like a status, point of view that people try to argue against, colonies having to, reclaim their independence. They would be defenseless against, other nation states that would want to invade them. And, it's kind of stupid because it's more like saying that, well, if the US wasn't invaded by, you know, well, yeah, I don't think this is pretty much like a good, like a good logical argument, if somebody were to argue like this. But, if America was not, met with the invasion of the, how should I say, European armies that had came in, then somehow the quote unquote indigenous, Native Americans would not be as powerful as they are to properly sustain themselves. So therefore, everything would be more dysfunctional in the U.S. that we see today. So basically, the British not controlling the entire United States would basically be a much worse version that we see now. And I think that's a very loaded statement to kind of just go into the future and just predict that that's probably not true. But it's not to say every tribe was like a bad tribe, because not every single group of American Indians were that bad of people. But people like to speculate because they only go after like the tribes that are bad people, not the tribes that actually did focus on trying to modernize their people to invest in medicine, invest in building proper housing, proper farming, and actually innovating better ideas over time. So I think either way, to really kind of like simplify this and to summarize it, because I'm gonna have to make like a part two to this. Colonies don't serve a purpose to the people that live there. They only serve a purpose to the state that's invading that smaller land. So like if it's like a bigger country invading a smaller country, like for instance, if Hong Kong was doing good under British control, and therefore the UK, they were only providing a temporary benefit to the people that were there, and initially China had wanted to take over Hong Kong for a very, very long time, then the Hong Kongese people was not benefiting from both China or the UK, because those are two nation states that were already having political ties to go up against each other. So, if anything, the people of Hong Kong don't deserve to be under Chinese rule, and they should be, in their own sphere of protecting their own land, so therefore they can have their own sovereignty to a certain degree per se. So to kind of make that very simple, it's more like to say that no colony should exist at all, and all invading nation states that are trying to control as many colonies as they can are only hurting themselves, and they're hurting the people that are going to resist against them, eventually over time, where they don't want to deal with that level of control. And I think eventually that's where political domino, effect theory comes in, because people will eventually see the philosophy of understanding self reliance and bodily autonomy to be stronger in mass, in larger numbers. So yeah, to kind of just like finish this off, there are plenty of things in the world where people can say that having colonialism is a good thing, and somehow having colonies does make sense because it provides better protection for the people that want to become part of that nation state, which is not voluntarily. It is all done involuntarily through violence. So you cannot make a argument to justify that. So your only valid argumentation is to say that you are for initiating conflict and coercion, because there's no justification behind your claim to say that it is fine to just invade another piece of land that was never yours in the first place, because it's arguing for a collectivist position to say you don't value somebody's rights. You only value the political interests of the collective, that being the state. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I kind of wish I had more to say because, unfortunately, like I have to work, in the mornings, but I will come back onto this. This is definitely something that I'm going to dive in deeper because I really want to have more to say, like more to say, um, how should I say, like about this. So, yeah, like I'll definitely catch you guys very, very soon. And yeah, hopefully we can try to get back onto this. But yeah, man, I'm probably going to end it right there. I wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper to kind of like say what I wanted to say. So I'll probably make like another video after this. So yeah, definitely stay tuned. I got more videos coming. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys later, and until next time, peace.